All right, Thomas Dimitroff, longtime NFL GM. He's now the president of Sumer Sports. He is one of the smartest guests we have every single year. We did this a year ago. He's been on my show via Zoom in the past. I'm excited you're here. What's going on, buddy?
Look, I'm happy to be here. I always enjoy this. You make me smarter. That's such an important thing. When I get a chance to be edified by people in the NFL, that's a big thing for me.
I'm excited you're here. I want to start here. The two GMs here, I think there's a case to be made that the two GMs are the best in the league this weekend. I want to start with Howie. We've talked in the past about how Howie is so good at just the negotiation part. He would always, he said, ask for a second-round pick for everybody to a point where it got very frustrating. But just the way he finds value and the way he just plays the numbers game. I mean, like people kind of make fun of the dots and, that hasn't worked out as much. It's like you take a flyer on 10 guys and 3 of them work, and all of a sudden you win the Super Bowl because of it, or you get to the Super Bowl because of it. Take me through when you're watching Howie's team building, what you notice.
I mean, I do, and I've said categorically, he and Brett Veach, as you just mentioned, are at the top of their game. Yep. I mean, Howie's in that spot right now, I think, this many years in. I just think he's so calculated. He knows exactly what the team needs. He knows it because he's got really good football people around him as well. He's wildly open-minded. He is not insecure about having former guys like Dave Caldwell in there and Matt Russell and people that know what they're doing. He's always growing. And by the way, the other thing I love hearing from internally in that organization is that Howie has always worked at increasing his level of knowledge as an evaluator, right?
Yes,
he came in as a legal
100%.
guy. He's not one of those guys that's not writing reports. He's not one of those guys that's not talking about it. He's just got a real well-rounded intelligence to him. So I love that. I think his approach, again, it's direct. Yeah. It's not city. I like it. I like he's aggressive. He knows it's a not-for-long league. He knows also that though retention rate is important, I'm talking about draft and free agency, if it's not right, I love the fact that he has the confidence to pull the trigger on that and move on from those deals. It goes all the way back to Carson Wentz, right? Yeah. It's a big thing for him, I think.
Yeah, they understand like what must be done eventually, should be done immediately, all that stuff. What's funny to me is that, or not funny, but what's good to me when you talk about learning from those guys is the amount of stories you hear where those guys, where they're future GMs or former GMs, he takes what they say. And the story I always think about is like, from what I heard, like Joe Douglas told him a decade ago, hey, this team needs to get tougher. It needs to get XYZ in the trenches. And Howie, instead of saying, whoa, we're playing, it's like, no, Joe Douglas is right. Let's get tougher. Let's get this guy. And I think that shows you how evolved he is, that he's able to take that kind of, there's a lot of GMs who are shut off from the outside world or don't want to hear it. Like he wants to learn all the time. And I think that is an underrated trait when you're running a team.
Which I think is exactly right. And you think about Brett Veach, Brett, I mean, he's one of the best right now. He's a little younger, of course, in it all, but he's in a situation that's different. We were talking about that, how he's in charge of that football operations, no doubt about it. Brett is behind one of the historic leaders in football, right? And maybe in sport in general. What a great way for him to navigate that. It's going to be interesting to watch, and I love watching him navigate it now and does a great job with the same thing, knows what Andy wants, knows what the team wants, has himself around some really good football people, and he is one himself.
Yeah.
And I think when time comes, he's going to be the guy that's going to, after Andy ever decides to retire, like what a great spot he'll be able to step up, and he's fine with that, which is easy for him in my mind.
I think what's important with Veach, and I've talked to people in Kansas City about this, I'm sure you have too, he knows what kind of player Andy wants. And like that's the best job of a GM. Say, hey, we have one of the best offensive coaches of all time. I know what kind of slot guy he wants. I'm going to scout that. And like that, when you have that kind of telekinesis, good things happen.
Sometimes GMs, back to ego, will say, no, I know better. And they try to force fit that player onto the coach's table, and it just doesn't work. That's why when people start questioning whether 53 should be with the GM or the head coach, I think it depends on the situation, right? I truly do. And I think in the end, I mean, I was thinking about Dan Quinn and Meade and Atlanta. Dan had 53. I had 53 with Mike Smith before in the first head coaching situation. It really didn't matter. If you're not at loggerheads all the time about a player and you have a good, respectful conversation and respect each other's ability to evaluate, it does not matter where 53 goes.
I completely agree. I remember when Pete Carroll was asked about his relationship with John Schneider when they were rolling and they were hitting on every pick. Someone said to him at an owners meeting, they said, how do you break the ties? And he go, we never disagree. Like we get to a point. Now that doesn't mean the first time they watch a prospect that they both are in lockstep, but eventually you get to a point where the decision is made and nobody's yelling at each other because you are in the slot there where you understand each other. I think that's the most important thing, and I think Andy and Brett have that.
And I will say now, first time head coaches, I think they have so much on their plate.
Yeah.
I would say let it go 5 years in personally, and I think a lot of the head coaches who took it on at first are like, that's a lot of extra work.
Yeah.
Why don't we let the GM, if he's been in place, take it and then get to a spot where it might change in the future? But it really doesn't. It's not that big of a deal.
If you were Andrew Berry right now, and Myles Garrett comes to you and says, I want to trade. This is a guy who, like, as Andrew Berry said, well, he wants him to go Cleveland to Canton. Myles Garrett used that phrase in a statement as well, which I found interesting. Like, what do you do when that happens? Like, cap implications are huge. I'm not even sure if you're going to be able to get fair value for him, because I don't even know what fair value is, because he wrecks every single play. So put yourself in Andrew Berry's shoes. Myles Garrett comes to you and says, I want to get out of here. I'm owed a ton of money on the cap. What do you do?
I think the first thing you do is you have to get over that initial shock of someone like that important to the organization. We all know, and you know, I love Andrew Berry. I really think he's really good at what he does. I like Kevin Stefanski. I like the organization. I know they've had a lot of issues there, right? They're dealing with stuff again and again and again. Here's another one that is a major kick in the pants, right? As a GM, the last thing you want to do is deal with like that. That's a pit of your stomach. The initial is, as a GM, probably like, well, go. You know, that ego thing. Screw it then, go. Yeah. And then it's like, no, I'm not saying that. How do we get him to stay? How do we fix this? It seems as though they're not going to fix it. And then I think you have to step back and say, all right, take a deep breath. After the ego goes through all of this, where are we with the financial side? You know that. And the compensation. It could be great compensation for them, right? It could be what, Khalil Mack-ish? Yeah. We're talking two ones, three, maybe even more. You never know. The capital implications are going to be a really big deal for them, as you mentioned. How does he navigate that? That's a complicated. I don't know what you're looking for on that. It's really complicated, and you don't think that's on their mind every day. Now they're going into the draft thinking, you know, what are they picking right now?
Two.
They're two. They're two, and there's which we can get into the quarterback situation because that's a different situation.
I mean, it's hard because you need a quarterback, but also if you draft a rookie, it resets the clock on somebody like Myles Garrett who's saying, wait a second, I'm trying to win playoff games here and not sit around waiting for Shedeur or Cam Moore to develop. That's right. It's just it's a really complicated situation.
And, you know, this is a year, as you know, with the quarterback group. I mean, it's not last year's group. Of course, Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward are talented. I don't know if you would argue with me. Who is the third?
I would argue. I think Cam Ward is amazing.
Okay.
I think he's really amazing.
Okay.
I think that
you think Cam is worth the number one pick overall?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I think the way he is, I could show you 15 plays where I think he has almost a supernatural ability to understand where everybody is in a football field.
That's important.
And the confidence, and it's funny because, and I've said this on the show before, there's this weird, he is so calm in the pocket that I've had GMs tell me teams are actually going to be spooked by that because like he just hangs in there. He's a little casual with the ball in the pocket. He's had it swiped out a couple of times. Before last year, I think he had 46 fumbles in 4 years of college football. He only had a couple of this year. Like he's so calm in the pocket that if there's anything, it's that he needs to be more keep that calmness, keep that coolness, play with a little more urgency in the pocket, and not because my worry, if I had one worry, he knows where everybody's going to be, so he will take kind of jab steps against defensive linemen and roll out of the pocket. My problem is you're going to play Max Crosby, you know, in week 2, and you're not going to be able to jab step him. You're not going to be able to say, I know where he is, I'm keeping him there. He's going to bite your head off. And so I think there's going to be some growth there, but I think that I think he has the ability to become a franchise like pillar. I think he has the personality for it as well.
You don't mention Shedeur in all this conversation.
I have not watched. Shedeur's coming on the show on Thursday,
okay,
so
good.
I can give you some more
great
some in-person scouting. Yeah, we just distribute that to the GMs. I have not. I think he's really good. I think Cam Ward is better. I'd go Cam Ward, Shedeur too.
I get that.
I think that, you know, so much of the problem with evaluating Colorado is the offensive line wasn't as good, and he was put in crazy situations, and it was just a little bit different. I would have to watch more Shedeur to have a. I think he's going to be QB2, but I don't think that's necessarily the question. The question is that do you take QB2 second, or do you take him 10th? Do you take him? You know, do the Giants take him later? Like, I don't know. That's a really hard question for me to answer right now.
which is one of those things that the first overall pick that Tennessee's got on their plate, because as much as I believe in taking a quarterback there, and I know that's a long other conversation whether they should try to stay with their quarterback right now or go in the draft and pick one of these two guys, whoever that may be, and if it's Cam, or do they trade back because there's so much potential booty there available? But is there that much in today's? Like, I don't know. Are you going to get the same thing this year, moving back to 8 or 10 as Tennessee, as you would get last year in last year's draft? I'm not necessarily sure that's the case.
If Bill Belichick succeeds at UNC, it's because of what?
It's because he has got this unbelievable 30-second pitch in my mind. He's gonna get on with those guys and their uncles, and he's gonna say, I'm gonna do A, B, C, X, Y, and Z, not mixing words. Thank you. Move on to the next guy. I just think Bill, as you heard, I think he's one of the best ever, as we all do, like in many ways, and I think he's gonna do a really good job. I just will be interested to see how long he'll be there.
Yes. No, it will be. I mean, he didn't have the interest here. Maybe it's the kind of thing where he likes it. Chapel Hill's a beautiful place. I think there's going to be guys. It didn't happen this year, but there will be guys. Recruiting is kind of a lag effect. Like it takes a while for that to, you can't just show up on somebody's door and say, hey, come play for me. That happens in the portal, but not in recruiting. It might take a year for people to understand what his vision is and all that stuff. But I agree with you. I think there's going to be people saying, who better to get me to the league than Bill Belichick, who understands NFL body types. He's not going to make exceptions. That's the one thing that I respect so much about Kirby Smart. It's almost Belichickian. He passes on 5 stars.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't think the arm length is what it needs to be, like all that stuff. And if you have that kind of mentality, you're already going to. If you have NFL bodies, that's the one thing that the coaches tell me all the time at the college level. If you have NFL bodies, you're already going to beat 75% of teams. And I don't think Bill Belichick is going to take a bunch of, G5 lower level ACC bodies. He can take NFL bodies.
That's a great point. And I think he comes in there. There's an accountability side. Instant accountability side. Mac was a very good coach for many, many years, but obviously that program is in a spot where they need to ramp up their toughness and their accountability. And I think that's going to definitely happen with him.
What did you learn about the NFL interviewing for GM jobs this year? Like how much has changed, what owners are looking for, what did you take away from it?
I feel like what's happening now, there's more. Years ago when I took the Atlanta job and Arthur Blank brought me in, I thought I was to come in as a personnel director type of GM, or a personnel evaluator. And his was, no, Thomas, you have to dabble in 10 other departments. That was what was expected of me. And it helped me become a well-rounded person. When I'm talking about that, I'm talking about cap and contract. I'm talking about being, over top of coaching, over top of player personnel, over top of player programs, and et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of departments. I feel now through the interview process, they weren't that interested in that.
Yeah.
They're more interested, at least the teams that I was interviewing, I interviewed with 2, it had a lot more to do with a scaled down version of what that was. Not diminishing what the role is, more focus. Let's not think about all these other departments. Let's not really dabble that much, which I can argue about this, on data science and player care, because those are massively important. And they will always be for me as a general manager. If I'm not involved in that takes some adjusting. I just sensed that there was, at least in this go around, there was a focus on, let's build the football team right now. And as you're going to see, even with Tony Baselli, in Jacksonville, they're bringing on that president of football operations to take the other other duties off of the GM and the head coach, the GM mainly in this, and let them run that side of it and let them really get back to the basics of building the football team.
Yeah, and you've seen that. I think sometimes there's a hesitancy because, too many cooks in the kitchen. But you think about Detroit with Chris Spielman, where he's there as a sounding board. I don't think Chris Spielman is taking over the draft room in the 3rd round and saying, no, we're going to draft this guy. He's letting Brad Holmes work his magic. But just having a guy who understands the franchise, understands the market, all that stuff to be there, I think Tony Baselli can be probably pretty good. I think you sometimes need that, especially when you're a little bit in the wilderness, maybe like Jacksonville's been the last few years.
Well, I mean, you look at that. I think Tony coming in that role versus Tom Coughlin, who we all have a great deal of respect for, that was cumbersome for Dave Caldwell, right? I think Tony coming in there, Baselli as he does, which, a Hall of Famer, and he knows O-line. Do you think he's going to have an opinion on O-line and O-line draft and free? No question, and he should, 100%. Right. If I were to be there with him, I would be tapping into his knowledge that way all the way. I do know, to your point, he's not going to be in there making, at least that's my point, I don't think he's going to be in there. He's going to let the head coach and ultimately the general manager do what needs to be done. That's why they're hiring those people.
You work a lot with data, obviously, at Sumer Sports. I have a couple questions on. I'll start here. What's the most important thing you've learned about the sport of football since you started working with all this data and just understanding? And we have more information on football than we ever had before. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing to see weekly some stat I didn't know existed, and all of a sudden it helps contextualize. Most important thing you've learned working with that data in the last few years?
I know that this is not black box, and you and I have talked about it. It's not pressing a button and getting the answer. It's an augmentation tool, so that's an important thing. What I've learned about it is more, I'm not learning how to model and code. Of course, I'm around it a lot with some of these people now, and I'm amazed at where their brains are on it, as you can imagine. What I've learned a lot more about is the implementation of it. And what I realize is virtually everything you do in the building of your team, and many facets of the football operations, you can have data as a juxtaposition point. Yeah. That to me is huge. Meaning anything. It could be, hey, I'm looking at this guy's agility, and let's run the agility data on it. And then when we're in our draft meetings, let's talk about it. We have him as a 6 agility, basically. Yeah. And then the data is saying that he's an 8. Well, it's not going to be that we're moving him to an 8. It's like we're going to sit down and do a lot of the work to find out why there is a difference there. That's a big thing. But what I realize now more and more, I think you can have that line item of data on everything you're doing, and that I never would have thought of before. And quite honestly, if I were to ever go back into a setting and the organization was open to it and allowing me to help build that data department, I know a lot more of what I'd be looking for that now versus back in the day bringing a couple data people, right? I'm so much more versed in it and involved with it every day. Yeah. By the way, I was trying to deliver that point when I was in my interviews. I'm not just sitting in Bordeaux drinking wine for the last 3 years. I literally every day of my life, I'm dealing with data in football, evaluating and comparing with all the data out there. Because look, there are times when there's data and it does not marry up or match to what we know and what we've seen from a scout's eye, our subjective eye. And so I think it's there. It's great for comparatives, and you also have to have the bright enough mind and the open enough mind to say, we're gonna jettison this piece of data right now because it's not in line with what we know at the core is what we should do. So I think that's important.
It's fascinating. Couple more for you. If you could wave a wand and change the way teams look at draft prospects or anything, with whether that's data, whether that's just something you think process-wise you've changed your mind on, like if Goodell said, hey, we're putting you in charge of making the draft more efficient as far as evaluating, is there anything you would try to change with the way teams look at prospects?
I would have to say it comes back to making sure that you're doing a lot more work on applying the data to be able to compare, because there are too many times in our business where people are shooting from the hip a little bit more than I feel comfortable. Even now, I'm a football guy through and through at the core. I've been doing it for 30 plus years, 35 years of evaluating. And yet I know there is no way that you cannot look at prospects properly and apply the proper, least utilization of it. And again, I know I'm preaching again to you because you believe it. I do. And not just because I work for Sumer Sports. It's not, I don't think it's responsible if you're not looking at the whole picture in today's world, right? That's a big thing for me.
Yeah. Last thing, we do a thing called One Rep Back, which is a play you'd like to replay with GMs, with people who run teams. It's a player, a scouting report that you, and so Brett Veach had this on Fred Warner yesterday. We've done this before, but I want to get a guy where you didn't see it with a guy and then he popped at the NFL level. What is your guy where you're just like, I didn't know he'd be able to do this? Where are you going with that?
Oh my gosh, I don't want to use the same one I used last time. Do we know what
No, it was that you did the opposite. You gave me a lineman who didn't love football.
So if I give you one and it's the same one, you're
no, it's the opposite. We're looking for a guy who popped in the NFL, but you didn't see it. You passed on him.
Yeah.
So you did a guy who didn't play for the Falcons.
Okay, so I look at that, and I think the one that really bothers me over the years is we ended up taking Parade Jerry in the 09 draft in lieu of taking Clay Matthews. And so Clay Matthews, was a difference maker for many years, right? There were reasons. We didn't think he fit our scheme. this is where you can kind of overanalyze. And that was one that I think, man, I look back on that. Even when he sees me around every once in a while, he still has an edge towards me because he had background. He had some background in Atlanta from his grandfather, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah.
I think it was Peter Kahns was the one you gave us last time.
And that was a tough one for me. That Peter Kahns one, God bless Peter. He's a great guy. Yeah. But when he was telling me that he was thinking about greener pastures when he put his hand down in the dirt, I'm like, all right, I love you, man, but we gotta get after it.
Clay Matthews is a good miss. I can see how that could haunt you a little bit. Yeah, a bad miss, but a good one for an example here.
Yes, as an example. Yeah.
Good one from me, bad one for you.
That's right.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Thank you.